Arnab Goswami on the debate at 9. Presented by Amity University. Powered by RP Sanjeev Goenka Group. Ever Ready and Fujitsu General.
Good evening and welcome. The lobby in India now has the Al-Qaeda support. If this doesn't make the lobby that used the hijab issue to polarize, to divide, if this doesn't make the lobby do some soul searching, then I don't know what will. Everybody is asking tonight, why has the Al-Qaeda chief, Ayman al-Zawahiri, who has been presumed dead by many very often, suddenly emerged and got straight into an anti-India tirade and tried very hard to bring back the hijab controversy. It's because, like the lobby, the Al-Qaeda chief wants to use this issue and any other issue that he can, for that matter, to polarize Muslims, provoke Muslims in India. The lobby and the Al-Qaeda are both equally frustrated that in India people believe in the rule of law. The lobby and the Al-Qaeda are very frustrated that in India Muslims are an integral and growing part of the Indian cultural and political fabric. And in this collective and combined frustration, the lobby and the Al-Qaeda and their political spin-offs in India are working hard to find ways to divide India on religious lines. And today I say to the lobby, wake up, wake up. Now that you have got the Al-Qaeda's support, you should think about how the people of India look at you, how poorly they think about you. The people of India are questioning both the lobby and the lobby's great supporter, Ayman al-Zawahiri. And wherever Osama's supporter, who is today supporting the lobby in India, is hiding, I think we should shout out loud and give him a fitting answer as a united nation tonight. That is debate number 2 this evening, ladies and gentlemen. Some people couldn't believe it, that in frustration the Al-Qaeda has waded into the hijab row in India. Can the opportunistic provocation over the hijab or beyond be allowed to continue? Is it not time to say no to radicalization? But my first debate tonight, NATO foreign ministers are currently meeting for the first time since the Bucha genocide. What will come out of the meeting and where is the war headed? That's debate number 1, and here are the headlines this Wednesday evening on the debate tonight. America fires more sanctions on Russia. Putin's daughters of the Russian Prime Minister are now sanctioned. NATO foreign minister meet on Ukraine. They are promising more weapons and help but won't enter Ukraine. Poland prepares for war, issues guide to civilians to be prepared for chemical and nuclear warfare. Pope Francis condemns the Bucha killings, calls it a horrendous massacre that exposes the impotency of the United Nations. The terror group Al-Qaeda uses the hijab controversy to provoke attacks in India, issues a 9-minute video. And first, the radical PFI, now the terrorist group Al-Qaeda. Can the radicalization reality be dismissed anymore? Ladies and gentlemen, a NATO meeting is currently underway. It is the first since the Bucha genocide. It's happening now. So far, 19 countries have expelled over 300 Russian diplomats. But Ukraine needs more than cosmetic action. Will the NATO meeting determine the course of the war? What will come out of the big NATO meeting? Here's what's happening, and then we debate.
The heart of Borodenka, which has been completely demolished. In fact, there have been buildings which have been flattened, turned into complete rubble. This is what remains right now of a building completely charred. There are residential buildings all through. There is a line of residential buildings that you see in this entire area. Visual, as you see right now, the security service as well as the bomb disposal squad currently right now at the very spot trying to defuse the bomb.
इरपिन की तबाही आपने देखी, लेकिन उससे ज्यादा तबाही इस समय बूचा शहर में देखी जा सकती है। यहाँ घर के घर जो है वो पूरी तरीके से वीरान हो चुके हैं। यहाँ सब कुछ तबाह हो चुका है, यहाँ सब कुछ निस्तनाबूद हो चुका है। घर के अंदर की तस्वीरें देखिए आप और अंदाजा लगाइए कि इन घरों में कभी लोग रहा करते थे, कभी बच्चे खेला करते थे, कभी गाड़ियां पार्क हुआ करती थी, लेकिन आज वो सब कुछ खत्म हो चुका है।
Recenti notizie sulla guerra in Ucraina, anziché portare sollievo e speranza, attestano invece nuove atrocità, come il massacro di Bucha. Crudeltà sempre più orrende, compiute anche contro civili, donne e bambini inermi.
Тому що ми розуміємо, з ким ми маємо справи. Туреччина і тому посередники чи посередницьку місію будуть виконувати ті чи інші лідери. Туреччина одна з них.
У нас есть все основания полагать, что сделано это было для того, чтобы отвлечь внимание от переговорного процесса, отвлечь внимание от того, что украинская сторона уже после Стамбула стала отыгрывать назад, пыталась выдвигать все новые условия, а как только западные СМИ разогнали фальшивку про город Буча, украинские переговорщики попытались вообще прервать переговорный процесс.
I'm afraid that we will see more. That we will see more examples of the killing of civilians, more examples of atrocities, and more examples of targeting killing of civilians, which actually are war crimes.
Ukrainians want action.
I think UN failed, NATO failed, and criminal courts failed. So we will have to do it by ourselves, and we are ready to do it. Because the organizations that were supposed to keep peace allowed for all this horror to happen in my country.
The Russian troops left this area on Friday. There were several dead bodies that were actually lying on the road, which the city council has now actually cleared up. But the fact of the matter is that this is a grim reminder of the war that started on the 24th, continued for several weeks put together.
In coordination with the G7 and the EU, an additional sweeping package of sanctions measures that will impose costs on Russia, send it further down the road of economic, financial, and technological isolation.
I have no doubt that the international community, Britain very much in the front rank, will be moving again in lockstep to impose more sanctions and more penalties on Vladimir Putin's regime.
First, we will impose an import ban on coal from Russia worth 4 billion euros per year. This will cut another important revenue source for Russia.
W nadchodzącym spotkaniu ministrów spraw zagranicznych NATO
The NATO meeting means more sanctions for Russia, and Russia is already facing the effects. NATO foreign ministers are set to address President Putin's war against Ukraine, and it remains to be seen which way the war will head. Let's debate.
Well, as of now, there are 34 countries meeting in Brussels as we broadcast this tonight. And it's the first ever NATO meeting since the genocide in Bucha. And that's the live shot from outside the venue of the meeting in Brussels, coming into our newsroom. And ladies and gentlemen, this evening I'm joined by Viola von Kremont-Tobadel. I hope I got the pronunciation right. She's a member of the European Parliament, member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, and first Vice Chair of the EU-Ukraine Parliamentary Association Committee. Valentin Yakushik is Professor at the Department of International Relations and Social Sciences. He's live from Kiev. Dov Zakim is former Undersecretary of Defense in the George W. Bush administration, currently Senior Advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Professor Andrew MacLeod is a visiting professor in the War Studies Department of King's College, London. And John Mark Dugan is an expert in geopolitical strategy, military strategy, and former US Marine. John was from Moscow. Kunal is from the Department of Foreign International Relations at EG University. I hope I got the pronunciation correct. Joining us live from Izmir in Turkey. Anton Barbashin is editorial director, Riddle, and a political analyst from Glasgow. And Johan Backman is a political scientist and human rights activist from Helsinki. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us tonight. If I can first ask question is to Viola. Viola, is NATO really capable of doing anything much? Because if NATO is serious, if the West is so serious about taking a stand on Russia, why don't they stop taking Russian oil? It's hypocritical to be taking Russian oil and then, which is the main source of Russia's revenue, continue to pay Russia, continue to build Russia's economy, and then also continue the war at the same time. By doing so, Viola, one gets the feeling that you are financing those who you are accusing of being the perpetrators of the worst human rights abuses. Yes, please, Viola in Strasbourg.
Yes, hello, good evening. Well, I mean, this is the crucial question, and you can imagine that many people, many executives, but also parliamentarians, many more people here in the European Union working exactly on that matter. And we have already reduced and decreased the dependency on Russian oil from 35 to 20%, but to have a complete ban immediately would, of course, have a severe economical impact, not just on the German, but also on quite a number of member states' economy and also society. And of course, we are not only dependent on oil, but also on coal, on nuclear, and especially on gas. With gas, it is in particular difficult because we have the certain infrastructure for that, and we need to get rid of that as soon as possible. We have, as I said, also reduced we have diversified the sources of gas supply. But nevertheless, it is extremely difficult. It's a huge dilemma. And you're absolutely right. Every cent which is given to Putin fuels into his war machine, into his aggressive war against the peaceful Ukrainian neighbor. We are very much aware of that. But nevertheless, we try also to defend Ukraine on many other, let's say, fronts, such as the military front, on the humanitarian front, refugee front. Many more things need to be put in place, and the European Union, its member states, are extremely active and very much committed.
But the sort of sense that one gets, Viola, is from Moscow. The sort of sense one gets, and I can put this across to John and Anton Barbashin and Johan. The sense one gets is that Russia knows that the West can't do anything. And if I can put that question to our guests in Moscow, John, Mark, I mean, that's why Russia is putting out these dares. And Russia recently said that America is lying. Americans are liars. They have increased their own oil imports from Russia by 43% in the last week of March. Now, what I expected to see, John, was a denial of that from America. America should have said, no, we have not increased our imports of oil from Russia by 43% to about 100,000 barrels a day. But America didn't say anything. Now, what that meant was, the way I'm looking at it from India, John, is that America is telling India, America is telling other countries to do anything while it is increasing its oil business with Russia. And that was a dare from Russia, wasn't it? It was a dare from Russia to America to come clean before the world on its own side business with Russia while it's preaching to the rest of the world. John.
Well, so the U.S. is very good at telling other countries what they should be doing, and then not doing the same thing for themselves. They have a long history of doing this, and this is just one more example of the politicians in the West, particularly in America, saying, we have to do this, but we're not going to abide by the same rules. It's external politics, and it happens inside too.
Yeah, but then why is that the case, Dov? Why is America almost doubling its oil imports from Russia? I mean, actually, it's very strange that America is doing more business with Russia on oil. It has increased its oil imports by 43% in the last week of March. It's incredible. Why is it doing
they
it?
can't.
What is America hoping to profit both ways? One, by buying Russian oil, then by selling arms to Europe, and at the same time helping its arms industry make money by extending the war in Ukraine?
Well, you've asked a bunch of questions, so I'll answer them. First, who's your source for this increase? It's Russia. The Russians are saying that. The Russians are also saying that all the reporting that your own reporters, Shazia Nishad was just on, and what you're just showing now, the Russians are saying, oh, this is all fake. Why should you believe the Russians? Why don't you believe us? The president signed an executive order. The gentleman from Moscow, who sounds to me like an American who's definitely in the wrong place, as far as I'm concerned, he's buying into this Russian nonsense as well. And I might ask you, by the way, you're criticizing us. You're saying we're trying to sell arms. What would you rather have? That the Ukrainians would have no arms, and that what you're showing now in Luhansk and what you're showing all over will completely get even worse? Would you like the Russians to march into all of Ukraine? Come on. And oh, by the way, my dear friend,
you're asking me,
and you and I have disagreed before.
You're asking me.
Why has India not condemned what you've shown on your own television?
You're asking me.
Why don't you condemn the massacres?
Of course we have.
Why don't you go public?
Of course we have. I don't think, Dove, see, the thing with you is, Dove, that you're a very nice man, but you have one human failing, is that you watch the wrong news channels. You still watch American propaganda channels like Fox and CNN. You should be watching Republic. If you did, and by the way, Dove, we have the largest reporting crew right now in Ukraine. We had 5 to 6 journalists in Bucha. We brought out the visuals from Bucha, and the fact and allow me to complete. You asked me also, what is the source of your information? Now, the source of the information is the Deputy Secretary of the Russian Security Council, Mikhail Popov, who's been quoted everywhere, including in the Western media. What I expected, I don't know if I expected too much. I want to ask Professor Andrew McLeod from King's College London. What I expected, Professor Andrew McLeod, was a denial from America. I wanted the Americans to refute this Russian propaganda. If it was indeed propaganda, Americans should have come out and said, listen, this is propaganda, it is false. We have not increased our oil imports, we have reduced and almost stopped our oil imports, as the claim has been. But Washington remained quiet, and that's why I'm questioning that. I don't know if an American rebuttal was in order, Professor Andrew. I think it was.
I think truth is in order, and if the Americans have not been increasing their oil, then they need to come out and say that. But what we need to underline here is the Ukraine situation is putting a lot of economic pressure on a lot of countries, including India. I mean, India is in one of the most difficult positions of any country at the moment. The vast majority of sunflower oil imports into India come from Ukraine. Wheat come from Ukraine and Russia. Most military equipment in India comes from Russia, and parts come from Ukraine. So India finds itself stuck on both sides of this coin. And we do need to get the truth from all parties at the moment. What are the Americans buying? What aren't they buying? What are the Indians doing? What are they not doing? Because what we've actually got to confront ourselves with now is how far do we actually want to go in stopping Russia, and how much do we recognize that really what we're seeing in Ukraine is the preview of what happens when China goes to war about Taiwan?
I think I think you've hit the nail on the head. I've always felt, and Professor Andrew McLeod, I have also said from day one that this is a preview for what will happen in Taiwan. It's China which is testing the West. You're spot on out there.
And India is playing a critical role in this, if I can say so, because India, as part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization that Russia's part of, and it's chaired by the Chinese, but India talking about joining the Five Eyes intelligence community as well, and building better alliances with Australia through the Indo-Pacific. India, as the former head of the Non-Aligned Pact, is now playing an incredibly important role. Which way will India jump on the border with China in its negotiations with Russia and Ukraine? India can play a really important role here.
Professor, I have no doubt, and I agree with you, India is a very critical member of the SCO, BRICS, BIMSTEC, Quad, everything. But at the same time, I think, Professor, you very, very intelligently try to bring the focus on India, and I want to bring the focus back on the West, because we're talking about NATO and the West right now, Professor. And my question is, at least India is not being hypocritical about it. We are saying we're doing business with Russia. We're doing more business with Russia, but what we import from Russia is just a small fraction of our total imports. But we are not telling the world. We're not telling other countries to ostracize Russia. We're not. It is America which is doing it. And I'm asking one question which Viola alluded to earlier. Let me put that question to Johan Blackman, who's joining us from Helsinki. The fact is, Johan, European Union is phasing out Russian coal delivery, but it is not cutting out oil supply. It is not even completely cutting out coal delivery. In other words, even the European Union, which is giving so much emotional support to Zelensky, is continuing to subsidize Russian coal and Russian oil in billions. Johan.
Yes, thank you very much. The problem is that we cannot stop importing coal to Finland, because actually we found out that the coal is purchased from Switzerland, according to the documents. So actually we tried to stop import coal, but then the company who is selling us the coal, they threatened to sue us in a court. It's very complicated legally. And also several parties have said that they will sue us if we stop importing something, or if we stop a trade, because that would be a violation of the agreements we have signed before with various countries. The agreements concerning import from Russia are not necessarily with Russian companies. You have to understand that.
I do understand it, but then is it also an admission in a way, what you've just said, is that also an admission in a way and I want to put this to Valentin Yakushik. Valentin, you realize what everyone is saying here is an admission in a way that the war cannot end. Because what we are hearing from Germany, from Hungary, from the EU, from America, is that we will continue to do business with Russia. It's a very strange realization that is coming on 42 days into the war. 42 days a bit too late, Valentin. Basically, the rest of the world is saying it is impossible to live without Russian gas. It is impossible to live without Russian fuel, Russian coal. So which means that the sanctions against Russia will never be totally complete. It's impractical what they are saying. Professor Yakushik, what's the implication of this?
It's a kind of realpolitik.
Yes.
It's egoistic policy from the West. Ukraine is doing very well defending the West from a Russian attack at its own expense. And the West is helping Ukraine with military supplies, but it's not going to take any risks to go into the war and to lose too much with some specific sanctions against Russia. Well, I see at this stage it's typical business policy. But as I was already mentioning on your program, it seems that this war between Russia and Ukraine may remind very soon Kurukshetra war from Mahabharata, when more and more powerful means of war go into effect, and when more and more regions of the world are involved in this. We are at the stage when it's still possible to stop the war.
How?
We need to have a humanistic approach from the United States, first of all, and to have communication with Russia on that Russia stops its inhuman actions, stupid actions which are against Ukraine and against the Russian nation. It undermines the Russian positions for the future. Russia is in a trap. They have to stop as soon as possible and to find some kind of compromise and way out. Ukraine is losing its infrastructures, its people, its economy.
Yes.
So new approaches, spiritual approaches have to be taken.
What spiritual approach? I mean, you just mentioned realpolitik, then you mentioned the spiritual approach. I don't think a spiritual approach is going to work. We need a practical approach. Either the rest of the world completely blacks out Russia economically, or it doesn't. And what I'm hearing right now is that it won't. It's not like it cannot. The fact what I'm hearing, Anton Babashin, I'd like to come to you in Glasgow. What I'm hearing, Anton, is that the rest of the world is saying, we are with you, We feel very bad about what happened in Bucha. We are with you. We'll make statements on this. We'll condemn this. But I'm sorry, we have to buy Russian gas. I'm sorry, we have to pay for gas in rubles. Hungary actually said, Mr. Ganal, that we will pay for gas in rubles. You know, and Hungary also said the European Union has no role to play in our gas supply deal with the Russians. So that's what Viola, you want to make a point on this before you go? I think you have to go. So I'll just let Viola in for a minute before I come to Professor Gunal in Turkey.
This is definitely one of the big points. You have mentioned Hungary. Hungary is right now the only one tries still to align with Russia. That's not of a help. I think we all try to unite. I mean, India has actually a big interest in trade, has a big interest also in the, let's say, territory integrity. I think this should be a common interest, apart from the moral and the more, let's say, I mean, ethical standards, which we all should uphold. I mean, it's not up to us to tell anybody what to do. But for example, that India now, for the first time in a larger extent, exported grains to the world market was already kind of a contribution, and I think we should praise India for that. I hope India, as a strong partner on the international level, will play a crucial role in all the matters which can help to stop the war. But honestly, I think what Russia did for the last 6 weeks and also from 2014 on cannot be just ignored.
But Violet, nobody's ignoring it. Nobody's ignoring it. Violet, nobody's ignoring it. What I'm trying to say, and can I get Anton in on this? And what I'm trying to say is at a practical level, 42 days, 43 days into the war, we are sort of having this conversation where we are saying, listen, a complete sanction is not possible. What does that mean? If we are saying today a complete sanction is not possible, then Anton, I'm reminded of what happened a month back. A month back, the world was told, we cut off Russia from SWIFT. We will impose such sanctions that they will come with their knees bent to the negotiating table. And that's not happening. It's quite evident that it's not happening, whether the West likes it or not. Anton, what are the implications of that?
Look, I think you are overestimating what effect financial sanctions might have on Russia. Russia has enough steam to last this war for another few months. The only way you can support Ukraine definitively is supply more arms, because it is clear that Moscow is set on gaining a definitive military victory on the ground in the east of the country. It's refocusing its forces there. So what you can do is give Ukraine more arms, so it could stop this victory from happening. It could do more damage on the ground, and only that could stop Putin. I mean, there's nothing else. All of those economic sanctions are damaging Russia severely, but they're damaging Russia in the long term. They're not changing the attitude. They're not changing an approach right in the moment.
And probably won't. What do you think, Professor Gunal? When the European Union's foreign policy chief actually said, Professor Gunal, he said, we've given Ukraine 1 billion euros, but 1 billion euros is what we pay Putin every day for the energy he provides us. Big admission from the European Union.
Yes, fortunately, but as NATO foreign ministers convened today, I think there will be more important decisions related to that. I'm not sure about the sanctions, but there will be more weapons coming from the NATO members probably, because NATO officially declared today that it was Putin's brutal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. And we are expecting them to support Ukraine's right to defend itself, including, as the way they did it, supplying more anti-tank weapons, air defense systems, and also humanitarian assistance together with financial aid, like that 1 billion euros. But they will also look to provide cybersecurity assistance as well. And they will help Ukraine to protect themselves against chemical and biological threats as well. And it will not be limited to that only. I think NATO and EU will also work for the other partners, which they think are vulnerable to Russian threats and interference, including Georgia and Bosnia-Herzegovina. They will also talk about the next strategic concept of NATO, and this will guide the alliance adaptation to the new global security reality. And it needs to be ready until Madrid summit in June. And this will all address the implications of Russia's aggressive actions, the way they call it, and the future relationship with Moscow as well.
Yes.
But they will also talk about China's growing influence too. I mean, it should not, it will not be limited to Russia only. Both the EU and NATO will also.
Sure, but one more fundamental point where we get confused when we are watching this from here is, here we are today, 42 days into the war, Dove, and America is giving Russia money. The European Union is giving Russia a lot of money. The European Union foreign policy chief says we give Russia $1 billion euros a day, and then we give some 300 million to the Ukrainians to keep fighting. So 42 days into the war, here's the situation how I see it, Dove, and don't be angry, Dove, but this is the truth and the reality, and as as an evangelist of the truth, you must support me when I tell you this. Your country, of which you have served as an Undersecretary of Defense, is actually funding both sides. You're funding the Russians, you're giving the Russians a lot of money, your allies are giving the Russians a lot of money, and then you're also saying that we will test hypersonic missiles now. So it's a crazy situation. I don't know what the logic here is. Can you explain the logic? You are giving the Russians a lot of money. You have not implemented the sanctions. It is a truth. The sanctions have not come into effect. You're telling the whole world, the entire planet, to ostracize Russia, but you're doing an incredible amount of solid oil business with Russia. And on the other hand, you are now saying that you will test hypersonic missiles to be used on Russia. And you're making statements along with Australia and the UK that we are going to develop hypersonic missiles, which is a clear retaliation to the Russian use of hypersonic missiles. And then, at the same time, in order to continue the war, you're giving a little bit of money to the Ukrainians. A lot of moral support, a lot of emotional support, a lot of statements, and about 1% of the money that you're giving to the Russians. Can you explain exactly what the grand strategy in all this is? What is the grand strategy, Dove? I fail to understand it.
Well, to begin with, I think your numbers are wrong. We've given the Ukrainians over $1 billion. We've given the Ukrainians a lot more than anyone else has given. In fact, more than most countries together have given. So let's start with that. Well over $1 billion, and we just announced more, several hundred million more. That's number one. Number two is I'm checking right now, as we speak, on this business of importing Russian oil. The president signed an executive order not to import Russian oil. So I'm not sure. Remember, your only source is still the Russian deputy minister, who I'm
not sorry. I'm sorry, but
illegitimate.
My source in this context. Allow me. Since I won't allow you to misquote me. My source in this context, please, is the European Union. The admission that you've given Joseph Borrell, who is the EU's foreign policy chief, who has said, we give Putin €1 billion every day for the energy he provides us. Did he say that, John? John, on the other side, please. We'll get Andrew on the left as well.
But tell me, You asked me to let you speak, so please let me finish. The United States is not part of the EU. What Borrell is talking about is his 27 countries. That's not us. The only source you have about the United States supporting Russian oil is the Russian deputy minister. In the meantime, we have not implemented the sanctions. $1 billion
then why don't you stop the oil? Then why don't you stop the oil business with Russia? Simple. John, have they stopped the oil business with Russia? Have they stopped oil business with Russia?
Yes, I believe.
By whose claim? By whose claim? By whose claim? You've not.
Look.
You haven't. By whose claim? Show me a single official statement. Show me a single official statement where America confirms it has taken a call on Russia's principal source of revenue, which is Russian oil, that it is not taking in any oil imports from Russia. Show me a single statement. John, is there a single statement? John, Dove says America has completely stopped taking a single pint of Russian oil. You agree? I don't think so.
I don't believe it. You know, because whenever the American government refuses to comment on something, that's as good as an admission. I mean, just look at the Hunter Biden laptop. You know, the West, they have no real conviction on anything, all right? And America, they knew exactly what was going to happen when they started pushing Ukraine to join NATO, pushing and pushing. I mean, heck, one of the worst politicians that America has, Bernie Sanders, even this guy was smart enough to know months before the invasion that pushing Ukraine into NATO was an absolute red line for Putin, and that this was going to be the outcome. So, you know, the West has nobody to blame but themselves, and they're not so convicted in this war that they're going to stop taking Russian oil. You know what? Yeah, they sign executive orders all the time on stuff, but that doesn't mean that they're actually followed.
And can the sanctions work? Point being taken, Professor Andrew McLeod. If you see the ruble, the ruble did crash. It fell, but it's also rebounded. The ruble is rebounded, and the West is going about the fifth and multiple rounds of sanctions. But the fact is, the ruble is rebounded to pre-war levels, where $1 is buying 2 rubles.
We've been pretty much
$1 is buying 82 rubles. So we are, in a way, is it not? Doesn't it show that the ruble has rebounded because the Russian economy has not been impacted?
I think there's a couple of things to say in this. Firstly, sanctions are a tool that take a long time to be fully effective. We saw that particularly with the sanctions against South Africa that lasted nearly 3 decades. So sanctions are never a quick tool. The second thing to take note of is, yes, it's been 42 days into the war, but 42 days is not a very long time to decouple global economies from a whole lot of interacting contracts, be they legal, be they political. If you turned off 100% of Russian gas tomorrow, Germany would freeze. Germany would know that, Germany would fragment, and Germany therefore wouldn't be able to respond against Russia. So there's a lot of very delicate balances that need to be made. And you're right to be able to call out hypocrisy. And I agree where you're calling out hypocrisy, you're right to do so. But I think it is unrealistic to expect that the entire world can decouple in 42 days. And it's unrealistic to think that sanctions are a fast-acting tool. What we do need to have is a faster acting tool with continuing to support the Ukraine military, but also recognise, as we said earlier, this is the precursor to the China-Taiwan war, and we can't play all our cards yet.
You know, okay, so I want to take you up further on this. I'll give a point here. I believe, Professor McLeod, that the West is being very smart about it, and I believe, if I may say so, I think they are doing lip service to Ukraine. And it's really sad, Professor Yakushik, they're doing lip service to Ukraine and they're trying to play the headlines. For example, the European Union is saying today, we will ban Russian coal because they want the headline in the New York Times. The fact is, Russian coal, being bought is worth less than 4 billion euros a year from the EU, whereas oil imports are over 100 billion. So if the world really wants to squeeze, if the West wants to squeeze Russia, then you would agree with me, Johan, they have to stop taking Russian oil. Banning Russian coal or part banning Russian coal will make no difference. And that's where the West is perhaps, Professor Yakushik, fooling the Ukrainians into believing that they are actually helping them. Whereas they're not. They're not hitting where it hurts.
If the West wants to protect Ukrainian citizens, it's necessary to deploy Western forces in Kiev and in some other
but they won't do
cities.
That. They won't do that. They've made it amply clear. They won't do that. Professor, will they do that? They made it amply clear. 100 occasions they won't do that. If they wanted to do it, they would have done it by now. Do you agree, Professor McLeod? They would have done it by now. It's out of the question.
if the West were going to deploy troops, they would have by now. Let's be really, really clear on this. If Western troops go to Ukraine, we have World War III, which will very quickly move to tactical nuclear weapons, and question whether that will then move to intercontinental nuclear weapons. There is no doubt about that. There's only one way that Putin would respond if Western troops went into Ukraine, and that is to attack forcefully those Western troops, and the Western countries would therefore have to defend themselves and reply. Let's be very, very clear about that. And to an extent, you're right that Ukraine is a bit of a pawn. Ukraine, Moldova and Transnistria. They're the lines that Putin can fight in before going to a technical NATO country. When you go to a NATO country, then we've got World War III.
Yeah, I don't think we can run that risk. Professor Yakushik, we completely support the people of Ukraine. What they've been through in Bucha is terrible, but that runs the risk of a quick and dangerous escalation here. So Johan, let me come to you. What is the solution then? As of now, are we seeing this war go through this tremendously long, prolonged phase? Will this become a never-ending war, Johan?
I don't think so.
Okay, that was to Johan, please. Yes, Johan Backman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, go on.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I think that this will continue because actually NATO is impotent. NATO is incapable of doing anything. That's for sure. European Union is impotent as well. I mean, it is in the interests of European Union even more to continue the war than to stop the war. I mean, European Union is doing nothing to stop the war. And of course, if you want to have negotiations with Russia, if you want something from Russia, you have to respect Russia at least a little bit. So why are you publishing all these hate speech materials against Putin and against Russia, which are published in England and in
which hate speech materials are you referring to?
Well, that's a very good question. There are lots of them. There are lots of them, obviously. But I mean that the more than the month, this month or 40 days of war or special operation, as they say, this has been also a special operation from the British side, because the British side is leading a massive psychological information operations against Russia, against Russian people, by means of attacking Putin, by means of attacking Russia, by means of attacking Russian defense forces.
What precisely do you mean? I mean, are you talking about the articles about Putin? You know, there have been a fair number of news pieces put out. I don't know how much of this is psychological warfare, but we've seen some interesting articles recently, John, and I'm sure you've seen this, Dove and Professor McLeod as well, about how Putin bathes in antler, something like what is it? In the blood, antler blood, and how he's suffering from thyroid cancer, and he has several other diseases, and how he has grave psychological issues. Is that what you're referring to? Is that what you're referring to, Mr. Backman?
Yes, I'm referring to the continuous insulting news materials that Great Britain is first of all delivering to the world. The main source of these materials are in London, and I'm asking the UK citizens to stop that. It's useless. It's useless, and it has no effect on Russia. First of all. And the second, if you want something from Russia, you have to respect at least a little bit Russia, first of all, and the President of Russia. My country, Finland, has excellent relations with Russia, with the European Union, with NATO, with all countries. We have no problems with any country. We don't have any threat from Russia, and we have a good dialogue even between our presidents at the moment. So you should take example of Finland, and London should stop the campaign against
the NATO General Secretary General was welcoming your country to join NATO over the weekend. Yesterday, in fact, he made that comment. that Finland is and Sweden is welcome to join NATO. But that's not the point. The point that you made is that there's been a fair amount of psychological warfare. Can you tell me, on the other hand, where would you classify what happened in Bucha? In Bucha, I don't know the right in Bucha. What would you say to what happened in Bucha? Is that also fake news? Is that psychological warfare? What do you mean, John? That's not fake news. That's not psychological warfare. Sometimes you need to look at the truth in the eye and accept it for what it is.
Look, there's no doubt people have gotten killed in this war. A lot of people, you know. But one of the problems that we have is we have the Ukrainian forces. They're holding up in these hospitals and in these places, and they're using these civilians as shields.
Oh.
This is a war crime, okay? They shouldn't be doing this.
No.
They shouldn't be using their own citizens as shields. And there's a lot of contradictory evidence.
Dow wants to reply, I think. Dow, we want to say something to that?
Absolutely. I mean, that is the most outrageous statement I've ever heard. What about you yourselves, Arnab, your excellent reporters who've got the guts to go into all these places, and I've been watching that. They've seen what the damage has been done. Apartment houses are being used as human shields. What about the people that the Russians tied up behind their backs and shot them? Children, men, women, old women. I mean, look, you want to believe all the Russian propaganda? Go right ahead. But if you believe that nonsense, then you're actually an accessory to a crime against humanity.
Look at the screen, the mass graves. It's got what, 3 bodies in it? Come on.
Oh,
come on. There's so much
frankly,
disinformation coming out of the West.
You must be a traitor to your country. You sound like an American.
Absolutely.
Boy, you must be a big-time traitor because you are mouthing Russian fake. You want to talk about fake news? How many people need to be killed before you'll realize that Russia is a brutal, barbaric
Well, you know, why don't we ask the
criminal?
people of Syria that? Why don't we ask the people of Syria and Libya and all those other places, Afghanistan and Iraq, how many people need to be killed?
Because now we're talking.
Were you inspired by that? Are you inspired by what happened in Syria and Iraq? Is that what you're saying, John?
I'm sorry?
I'm saying, is that a copybook for you to follow? Is that a copybook for you to follow? That's what I'm asking you.
He's saying how many people need to be killed. Look, there's not a fraction of the people that's been killed in this war that have been killed in Iraq and Syria. And he's sitting there.
But numbers are not enough for you so far.
Preaching how wrong
the numbers are not enough for you so far. You want more casualties. You said, "Oh, how many bodies are there in that grave?" Well, just 3 bodies. You wanted more? Not enough for you? I mean, you're doing to do a body count. Don't go on the technicalities, John, with me. Professor Andrew looks a bit shell-shocked from London.
Look, both of them are right and both of them are wrong. I've been to 6 wars. I've been to Bosnia, I've been to Rwanda, I've been to East Timor, I've been to a number of other conflicts in the world. And the one thing that is true is war crimes are committed by all sides in every conflict. There's no army that comes out of a conflict with clean hands, including my own as an Australian and an Australian serviceman myself. So you can cherry pick the evidence that you want to make your point. But there is one point that is clear. Whilst there is some legitimacy to say the West pushed the Russians too hard by wanting to expand NATO into Ukraine, there is no justification for a war of aggression that Russia has launched against the Ukrainian people.
We're still waiting for the breaking news coming out from that NATO meeting. This has been a wonderful conversation, ladies and gentlemen. On the other side tonight, we had this statement which comes in from the Al-Qaeda, from Ayman al-Zawahiri, where he wades straight in to the hijab row, using that as a pivot to attack India. Ladies and gentlemen, what more does the lobby need to get exposed? Support from the Al-Qaeda? What next? On the other side.